we're diving into some sources about a pretty wild what-if scenario, one that could really shake things up in the tech world.
Absolutely.
We're talking about a hypothetical acquisition of Intel. And not just by any company, but by a group of some of the biggest names in tech. Qualcomm, Elon Musk, possibly even bringing in Tesla and SpaceX and global foundries.
It really is like a tech industry fantasy football draft.
Right.
But with some serious real-world implications if it were to actually happen.
Yeah, and to make things even more interesting, you sent over some sources that also bring in a certain former U.S. president, Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. That adds another layer of complexity for sure.
Exactly. It sounds like something straight out of a business thriller.
It does.
But, looking at these sources, there are actually some intriguing threads to pull on here.
Definitely.
Even if the scenario itself is, let's face it, highly improbable.
It's definitely improbable. But I think what makes it so fascinating is how it ties into some of the biggest trends in tech right now.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, you've got the ongoing chip shortage, the competition between the U.S. and China, and, of course, the rise of AI.
Right. All these factors kind of converge in this hypothetical situation,
Exactly.
making it all the more compelling to explore.
For sure.
So let's start with the players.
Okay.
You've got Qualcomm, a company most people know for their mobile processors.
Right.
What could they possibly want with a piece of Intel?
Well, if you look at Qualcomm's moves lately, they've been really trying to branch out,
beyond smartphones.
Exactly. They're pushing into things like automotive chips and even servers.
Okay.
But they're missing a key part of the equation.
What's that?
Manufacturing Qualcomm designs chips, but they rely on other companies to actually make them.
Ah, so like TSMC.
Exactly. TSMC is a big one.
And so that's where Intel comes in. They've got these massive fabrication plants, or fabs as they're called.
Right.
Could Qualcomm be after those to gain more control over their supply chain?
It's certainly a possibility. One of the sources you sent was an analyst report that suggests Qualcomm has been exploring options to increase their control. Getting Intel's fabs would give them a huge boost in capacity.
Yeah, they can make their own chips at scale.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They'd be like a chef who suddenly gets their own farm-to-table operation.
I like that analogy.
Complete control from design to production.
Right. But there's another piece to consider here.
Okay, what's that?
Intel's by 86 architecture.
Right, that's the dominant architecture for PCs and servers.
A market Qualcomm hasn't really cracked yet.
So where does that fit into all of this?
Well, Qualcomm currently uses the ARM architecture for their chips.
Yeah, which is mostly in mobile devices.
Right. But getting their hands on Intel's by 86 licenses and designs would be a game changer. Yeah. It would let them jump into the PC and server markets with a proven architecture that's widely used.
Okay, so Qualcomm might be after Intel's manufacturing muscle and their by 86 architecture.
It seems plausible.
But what about Elon Musk?
Yes, the wild card.
He's always pushing the boundaries with Tesla and SpaceX.
Definitely.
Where does he fit into this whole hypothetical acquisition?
Well, think about one of the biggest challenges Tesla's facing right now.
Chip shortage.
Exactly. The chip shortage has caused delays for some of their vehicles.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
And Musk, being Musk, wants to find a way to secure Tesla's chip supply long term.
So could he be looking at Intel for the same reason as Qualcomm?
It's very possible.
Vertically integrate.
Precisely. One of the articles you shared mentioned that Musk has talked about wanting to design Tesla's own AI chips.
For their self-driving tech.
Exactly.
And don't forget about SpaceX.
Oh, right, of course.
They're pushing the boundaries of space exploration. I can only imagine the kind of specialized chips they need for their rockets and spacecraft.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's where the potential synergy between Tesla and SpaceX becomes really interesting.
How so?
They could leverage Intel's expertise to develop custom chips for both electric vehicles and space exploration.
Okay, so we've got Qualcomm potentially looking to expand their chip empire. Musk aiming for chip independence for his ambitious ventures.
Right.
But there's still one more player in this hypothetical scenario.
Global foundries.
Right. They're already a major player in chip manufacturing.
Yeah, one of the biggest.
So what could they possibly gain from acquiring parts of Intel?
It all comes down to ambition. Global Foundries wants to be on the same level as the biggest players in the foundry business. Like TSMC and Samsung.
Oh, okay.
They want to be the go-to manufacturer for the most advanced chips, and getting a chunk of Intel's fabrication plants would be a huge step towards that goal.
But wouldn't that mean a massive concentration of chip-making power in the U.S.?
It would definitely shift the balance.
what about the global implications?
That's a key point highlighted in the research you sent over. A deal like this would definitely reshape the global semiconductor landscape.
Yeah.
U.S. companies would have a much stronger position in the market.
Which brings us to the potential role of Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay, let's address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
How would a hypothetical Trump presidency influence all of this?
Well, during his time in office, he was very vocal about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., especially in critical industries like semiconductors.
I remember that.
He even imposed tariffs on imported chips and pushed for incentives to boost domestic chip production.
So it's not hard to imagine him seeing this potential acquisition as another way to push his America First agenda?
It would definitely align with his previous policies.
But how would he actually wield his influence in this scenario?
Well, he could potentially use his political clout to push the deal through.
Even with all the antitrust concerns.
He might argue the national security interests outweigh the concerns about reduced competition.
So Trump could be the wild card in all of this, a catalyst that brings these companies together and reshapes the global chip landscape.
Certainly possible.
But before we get carried away with all the what-ifs, let's take a step back for a second.
Okay.
And look at how this theoretical division of Intel might actually work.
Right. We're talking about splitting up a giant here.
Exactly. How would they even begin to carve it up? Okay, so we've got Qualcomm maybe going after those fabs and the Buy 86 licenses, Musk wanting to make sure Tesla and SpaceX have all the chips they need, and global foundries looking to take on the giants of the chip-making world.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so how would they actually divide up all of Intel's assets?
Right. It's not like they can just, draw lines on a map and call it a day.
Exactly.
It would be incredibly complex, like a high-stakes chess game with billions of dollars and the future of technology at stake.
No pressure.
One scenario that I saw in those articles you sent over suggested that global foundries could take over a big chunk of Intel's existing manufacturing plants.
Makes sense.
Right? It would give them an immediate boost in capacity, and they could start producing chips for a wider range of clients.
Okay, that makes sense. Global Foundries is all about expanding their manufacturing capabilities. But what about those cutting-edge fabs that Intel's been building?
You mean the ones with the latest and greatest tech?
Exactly. Would they just let those go that easily?
That's where the strategic part comes in. Remember, Qualcomm is also interested in manufacturing.
Right, especially for their high-end chips.
Exactly. They might strike a deal to get some of those more advanced fabs so they can produce chips that can compete with the best that TSMC and Samsung have to offer.
So Global Foundries gets the established fabs, Qualcomm gets the cutting-edge ones, and what's left for Musk and his team?
Well, if you look at Musk's strategy, he's not really interested in becoming a major chip manufacturer. His focus is on getting the chips he needs for Tesla and SpaceX.
So what would he go after?
He'd probably target Intel's intellectual property, things like their CPU and GPU designs and those AI accelerators.
So he's like a master chef going into Intel's kitchen and cherry-picking the best ingredients to create his own unique dishes.
I like that analogy.
And I bet he'd want to poach some of Intel's top engineers too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The people who really know how to design and build these chips. One of the sources even mentioned speculation that he might try to recruit some of Intel's leading chip designers.
To join Tesla and SpaceX.
Yeah, having those people on board would be huge for developing those custom chips for their specific needs.
Okay, so we've got a possible plan for dividing up the spoils. But even if they could agree on who gets what, wouldn't they run into some massive roadblocks?
Oh, you mean like regulatory hurdles?
Exactly. We're talking about some of the biggest tech companies in the world joining forces.
You're right. Antitrust regulators would be all over this deal. They'd be worried about things like reduced competition, higher prices for consumers, and stifled innovation.
And what about the financial cost of all this?
Oh, yeah, that's another huge hurdle. We're talking about buying a company the size of Intel.
It'd be astronomically expensive.
The price tag could easily reach trillions of dollars.
Wow. Even for companies with deep pockets like Qualcomm, Tesla, and Global Foundries, that's a lot of cash.
It'd be like trying to buy a small country.
And then there's the whole challenge of actually merging these companies.
Yeah. The logistics would be a nightmare.
Different company cultures, management styles, even different technologies.
Integrating all of that would be incredibly difficult. Think about trying to merge the culture at Tesla with the culture at Intel.
It'd be like mixing oil and water.
And on top of all of that, we've got the political wild card of Donald Trump.
Right.
Even if he supports the deal, There's no guarantee it'll actually happen.
Things change quickly in politics.
They do, and a deal this big would definitely be controversial. There would be pushback from all sides.
So even if this group had the money and the best intentions, the political and regulatory obstacles seem pretty insurmountable.
They would definitely face an uphill battle.
But let's say, for argument's sake, that they somehow pull it off. What would happen? How would this grand Intel acquisition change the tech world? So we know this Intel acquisition faces some major challenges.
Yeah, antitrust concerns, the cost of the deal, the integration nightmare.
Right, and then there's that unpredictable political landscape.
Definitely a lot of hurdles to overcome.
But for a moment, let's imagine they clear all those hurdles.
Okay.
What would that new tech landscape look like?
Well, I think it would send shockwaves through the whole industry.
Yeah.
We could see the balance of power shift, especially in the foundry market.
Where companies like TSMC and Samsung are calling the shots right now.
Exactly. TSMC and Samsung are the dominant players.
Right. So global foundries with all of Intel's manufacturing capacity, they'd become a much bigger player.
Right. Absolutely. They could go head-to-head with TSMC and Samsung.
And that would change the global chip supply chain.
Yeah. It could lead to a more diversified market, which would be a good thing.
Less reliance on just a few companies?
Right. But it could also trigger a new wave of competition.
With countries and companies fighting for control.
Exactly. It'd be a whole new game.
Okay, what about Qualcomm?
How would they change?
Yeah, they get Intel's by-86 architecture and all that manufacturing capacity.
Right. They're already the leader in mobile processors.
So what would that mean for them?
They could become a much more diverse company playing in markets that Intel used to dominate.
Like PCs, servers, data centers.
Exactly. They could be making all kinds of chips.
It'd be like leveling up in the tech world, going from a specialist to a generalist.
I like that analogy.
And maybe even challenging Intel's legacy.
Right, in some of their core markets.
But what about innovation?
That's the big question.
Would this huge merger stifle creativity, or would we see new breakthroughs?
Well, there's always the risk that when a few companies control most of the market,
they get complacent.
Right. They might focus on keeping what they have instead of pushing the boundaries.
But then again, this merger could also bring new opportunities.
Oh, for sure.
Combining Qualcomm's mobile expertise with Intel's experience in high-performance computing.
Yeah, imagine the possibilities.
And what about the impact on AI?
That's a huge one. Getting access to Intel's resources could really speed up Tesla's work on their self-driving AI chips.
And who knows what SpaceX could do with a steady supply of custom-designed chips.
That's pretty mind-boggling to think about.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Definitely.
It could be more innovation, or it could slow things down.
It really depends on how these companies choose to move forward.
And of course, we can't forget about the geopolitical implications.
Right, a deal like this would definitely make some waves internationally.
Especially in China.
Oh, absolutely. China's been investing heavily in their own chip industry.
One of the articles you sent even talked about how this could escalate the tech war between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, it could lead to all sorts of retaliatory measures, more government involvement, maybe even a fractured global supply chain.
It really highlights how important the chip industry has become.
It's not just about technology anymore.
It's about geopolitics and national security.
Those tiny chips have become a key battleground.
And the outcome of that struggle will have a huge impact on all of us.
It will shape the future of technology.
So even though this whole Intel acquisition scenario is pretty unlikely,
very unlikely,
it's a really interesting thought experiment.
It makes you think about what's driving the chip industry.
And the future of technology as a whole.
Exactly.
It also shows how important it is to stay informed.
To understand what's happening in the market and to talk about it.
Because these trends will have a big impact on our lives.
They already are.
We need to be thinking critically about all this, you know.
About consolidation and government intervention and the ethics of these new technologies.
It's up to all of us to make sure technology benefits everyone.
Consumers, policymakers, industry leaders, we all have a role to play.